Welcome back to Logan Nano Aquascaping. My name is Logan, and today we're gonna flood my tiny little UNS 3N. This is a cool little 3-gallon tank that I've had on my desk since the holidays. It's been dry starting for the past 2 months, and it's looking really, really nice. So I'm super excited to flood it today and to talk about what we'll eventually be adding to this tank for livestock. But before we get started with the videos, I wanna give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video. That's Boost Plant. They provided the glass as well as the soil and the beautiful HARDSCAPE and filter for this tank, so massive thanks to them for sponsoring the video. All of the materials I'm using in today's build are going to be listed down in the video description, but you can also feel free to just check out boostplant.com and shop around for yourself. So without further ado, let's get started with today's video. Okay, so I've had this tank on my desk for about 2 months, and it has been really, really nice to have. The bulk of my day consists of video editing, so it's just really nice having a little slice of nature on my desk, and I really enjoy the lighting too. But sadly, I'm not able to keep it on my desk when we flood this, mostly because I'm out of electricity around my desk. So sadly, I have to move the tank over. So I'm gonna move it over next to my UNS 45U, and because this tank is so light, I don't need like a large sturdy stand. You can essentially put this on anything that's relatively sturdy. I would be careful with like really thin particle board, but I'm just putting it on a little wire shelf that I've attached sort of a little end table surface onto to help balance things out. So let's talk a little bit about the flooding process. So when you dry start an aquarium, the plants are in their immersed out of water form, and it's really important that when you flood them, you make sure they still have access to that CO2 or they're gonna go in the shock. So today we're gonna flood the aquarium, get the CO2 set up, get the filtration set up, and we're also gonna add some pre-cycled media to the filter so that we can totally bypass quite a bit of the cycling process. So let's start with the filter. Today I'm working with the beautiful UNS Delta filter, and I love this filter mostly because it is super compact and it's also very aesthetically beautiful. Let's go ahead and customize our media, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling some mature media from my UNS 60U. This tank's been set up for about 1.5 years. So this is gonna provide the nitrifying bacteria in the filter from day one. So it's gonna take all the ammonia released from the soil and convert it into nitrite, and then ultimately nitrate, which is harmless. So once the filter was all set up, I got the vinyl tubing set up. I just picked up some vinyl tubing at Home Depot. I'm using 1/2-inch vinyl tubing. If you have a larger filter, it's probably gonna be 5/8-inch inner diameter tubing, but you could always reduce that down as well if you want. And then I'm connecting it to some glass lily pipes that are super tiny and perfect for this little tank. I picked these up on Amazon and they were fairly inexpensive, about $30 for both of them. So once the filter was set up, it was time to flood the tank. And I'm using my little custom built Sharkbite system. I have an entire video on how to set this up, but this is really cool because without destroying any piping or anything, it just kind of taps in to the cold water line under my sink right here in my studio space. And then I run that through RO line. I've got a little ball valve that allows me to very delicately sort of trickle water into the aquarium, or I can open up the bell valve and fill a tank fairly rapidly. So I'll link the video for how to build this down below in the video description. As for the lighting, I'm running the beautiful ONF flat nano, and that is connected to the base, which sits under the leveling mat of the tank. And the cool thing about UNS tanks is they all come with a leveling mat. That's really, really nice. It kind of helps protect any surface you put your tank on, and it helps balance things out so that the glass isn't unevenly distributed on the surface. So this light is really awesome because it has 4 different dimming levels, which is perfect for me because when I first start up a tank, I like to run the lighting very conservatively. So I'm taking it down to about 50%, whereas with the dry start, obviously when there's no water, there's no risk of algae. I was running it at 100%, 12 hours a day. Now we're taking it to 50%, 7 hours a day. And if you're new to aquascaping, maybe setting up a new tank, I recommend that as a great starting benchmark. So it's really important for me to set up CO2 on day one, and that's exactly what I did with this tank. I'm just using a little paintball CO2 setup, and I'm diffusing the CO2 with a little TWINSTAR diffuser. They make way smaller diffusers than this even, but I just had this lying around, so I decided to utilize it. I think I'll eventually upgrade to one of the smaller AQUARIUM diffusers, but this TWINSTAR one is awesome, and I've got it way in the back, so it's fairly inconspicuous. So now let's talk a little bit about the next few weeks' maintenance. So I'm a firm believer of being very regimented with my maintenance process, and I implement a strategy that many other professional aquascapers and hobbyists use, that is fairly tried and true. So the first week of your tank setup, you're going to do daily water changes. And that may sound daunting, but if you're keeping a little nano tank like this, it'll really just take you 10 to 20 minutes, maybe less if you've got a great water change system. And I drain at least 50% of the water, fill it back up. After the first week, you're gonna do the same thing, but every other day. The third week will be every 2 days, so on and so on until you get to 1 to 2 water changes a week. For me, I found that the ultimate sweet spot I like to sit on once the tank is cycled is 2 30% water changes spread out throughout the week. And I apologize about the background. I had an adhesive background out here, but I'm realizing that it's sort of a weird texture and there's lots of bubbles underneath it. So I have to figure out another solution, but I pulled that off for now. And I'm happy to say that a couple days into this tank setup, it's looking really beautiful now that it's flooded. I used 3 cups of UNS tissue culture Monte Carlo, and they spread out really nicely throughout the dry start, but I also planted very, very densely from the start. If you are on a really tight budget, but you still want a high-tech aquascape, I cannot recommend a UNS 3N or a UNS 5N enough, because you can get little pieces of hardscape that are still gonna look really impactful, so you can build up height, you can build up depth, and you don't need to spend $200 on plants to have an instantly fully planted tank. So I would say between the 3 cups of MC, that's about $30 of plants. And I'm also featuring the beautiful mountain stone in this aquarium. I love it because it's so textured, it's so detailed. It almost has like a hard sandy surface to it. And if you look closely, there's little details that sort of just came with the stone, like teeny tiny little pieces of moss. Not sure if it's a terrestrial moss, tiny little roots. So I'm super excited. Now let's talk about the livestock. So this is gonna be a shrimp only tank, and I'm gonna stick with my favorite caradinas, and I'm leaning towards crystal black shrimp. I already very successfully keep crystal red shrimp, so I know I can do it. They're breeding in all my tanks that all have high light, high CO2. So this tank should be no exception. But if you feel you have an even better suggestion than crystal black caradina shrimp, let me know down below in the comments. Stay tuned for lots more updates on this tank, as well as all the other ones in my studio. And I'd also love to give one final thanks to Boost Plant for sponsoring today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys and gals next time.